Welcome to Retire with Purpose, a show specifically designed to help you maximize your financial confidence in retirement. Casey Weade is the CEO and Chief Visionary of Howard Bailey Financial, a certified financial planner and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's your host on Retire with Purpose.
Hey, I'm Casey Weade, and we believe in retirement strategies that are driven by meaning and purpose. Join us this week and every week as we discuss planning for your best retirement, pinpointing your purpose, building a rock-solid financial plan, and unpacking trending topics that could impact your financial future. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me.
Hey.
So if you're at retirement, in retirement, near retirement, or just seeking that coveted job optional status, you have found yourself a home. We're going to have a wide-ranging discussion today talking everything finance and retirement, from Social Security to how to best leverage your health savings accounts in retirement. We are also bringing back on the show a very special guest. We have America's tax expert, David McKnight's going to be joining us. David recorded with us our number one most downloaded podcast on the Retire with Purpose podcast when he was discussing the power of zero. He is now coming on our show to discuss tax-free income for life. But first, we want to share an article with you from our Weekend Reading for Retirees email series. What is that? Well, you'd know if you signed up at retirewithpurpose.com. That's one email that hits your inbox every single Friday with the trending topics that matter to you in the financial planning space that can help you make better decisions in retirement, along with summaries and takeaways from myself. Again, sign up at retirewithpurpose.com, and we're going to be covering one of those articles right here with you today. This one comes to us from Kiplinger. Some people like Kiplinger. People like Kiplinger. I don't know. I like Kiplinger. And it is titled Planning for Retirement Assets in Your Estate Plan.
You know, Kiplinger gives us some good articles. This one, written by Kathleen Stewart, is a great article, Casey, because it's a topic that we get given to us quite a bit by the families we sit down with. You know, where do I start my withdrawals? Where do I take my income from? What assets should I potentially leave for the next generation or to the church or to the charity? So it's all about planning for those retirement assets.
Yeah, and is this something that you've been thinking through? I think most often you may not really be thinking about your estate plan until you get to the end, until you're maybe 10, 20, 30 years into retirement. Then we start contemplating, okay, what do I want to leave to the kids? But you really need to get well ahead of this. You need to start thinking about what you want to leave to the kids, what you want to leave to charity, who you want to leave it to as soon as possible in life, but especially when you're stepping into retirement, because there's much to consider. Largely tax considerations need to be made here, and that's what this article really gets in depth about. But there's so much more that's involved. If you wait till the end of life, you could have missed out on thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of dollars. And so this is why we need to get ahead of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Kathleen here gives us a pretty good place to start, right? When she says, when developing or making changes to your estate plan, it's important to identify your goals. Number one, do you want to leave the bulk of your assets to your kids? And number two, do you have big plans to support charitable causes with your estate?
Yeah, is it going to the kids? Is it going to go to charity? How much? And really, how much is too much is quite often the question. You might be thinking, well, I want to leave everything to the kids. However, now, how much is too much? If I leave too much to the children, will that hurt them in some way? And I've seen this go the same way with charities. If I leave too much to the church, will that be a blessing on the church? Or will this be a negative for the church? But this is where we start. We first identify those goals. And quite often, it's difficult to make charitable decisions too early in retirement. And so it ends up being focused on the kids And then you have to ask the question, well, how do I best leave these assets to the kids? The number one priority, even if you don't know exactly who you want those assets to be left to, you need to have those assets titled appropriately or have beneficiaries designations set up appropriately, because at that point, you're really just trying to avoid probate. And that's what I see most often when we're working with someone at the onset of retirement. Maybe they don't know if they want to leave this to the kids, the grandkids, charity, their neighbor, their caretaker. They're not sure exactly how much they want to leave behind, but they do know this: we don't want it to go to probate. We want to reduce how much Uncle Sam gets. Well, you can do that very easily through things like beneficiary designations, titling of those assets, or maybe you have more complex legal documents like trust documents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's constantly one of the top 5 number one mistakes that people make is incorrect beneficiary designations, or maybe mom and dad were just joint account holders at the bank, and then one spouse passes away. Then now we have to make that a TOD or a POD, which stands for transfer on death or payable on death. To avoid those simple problems.
Well, and we review these things every single time we sit down with one of our clients. We're reviewing their beneficiary designations because things change. What kinds of things change? Well, there's a lot changing right now. One might be just your intentions. Maybe right now you feel like you want to give the kids a leg up, and you're going to leave behind what you have today, split it 3-4 ways. It'll give the kids a leg up. However, 20, 30 years down the road, what if you've done a great job investing and now you have 2, 3, 4 times as much as you have today? Now you feel like, I want to give the kids the leg up. Now I'm setting them up for life. We need to revisit this. Maybe you need to revisit it because of your beneficiary's circumstances. That could be marriage. Maybe they've been married. Maybe they've been divorced. Maybe there's drugs involved or alcohol involved, and you need to make adjustments. Maybe specialized trusts need to be set up for that matter. Maybe there's health reasons you want to set up a specialized trust. And then what do we have going on right now? We have tax rules, right? We have tax changes that seem to be happening much quicker over the last few years than we had seen over the last 20 years. We have the Secure Act that reduced the period of time your beneficiaries will have to distribute the assets from your IRAs. Now they have to take them out over 10 years if they're a non-spouse beneficiary versus being able to distribute those things out over a lifetime. So right now, we're working with a lot of our families to convert those IRAs over to Roth IRAs, or say take those assets. Those might be the assets we want to leave behind to the charities, and then making some trust adjustments to the language inside trusts as well, so that it's more friendly for the updated tax code. Then you have Biden's latest proposal that is going to restrict step up in basis. Well, that may mean that we want to start gifting assets today. That might mean that we decide we want to leave the Roth IRA instead of the after-tax assets. We need to continually update these things because life happens and, politics happen.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that I really like about this article is it talks about core assets and excess capital. Your core assets are the things that you're going to need to fund your day-to-day expenses. Once you identify, hey, these are all the assets we're going to need for these core expenses, now we've got some excess capital. And, Casey, I think oftentimes we see it where families are spending down some of that after-tax money first, trying to defer the IRAs. And that, according to what you just mentioned, may not be the best scenario.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important, just to reiterate what you said, Marshall, is to identify, there's core capital and excess capital. I like to define this as never money. Our clients know, hey, this is never money. I'm never going to touch this money. Do you have any never money? You probably don't have any never money if you don't know how much money you actually need today. And that's because you don't have a plan that systematically, through a process, addressed each and every one of your needs and risks that you're going to face throughout retirement, whether that's funds for liquidity, whether that's funds for income needs, whether that's funds for flexibility, inflation protection, estate planning, tax planning. There's going to be needs that you have. And once those things are taken care of, you can then have this excess capital, know you have this excess capital, and then set it aside as never money. Because as the article says here in Kiplinger, if those assets are earmarked for legacy purposes, for estate planning purposes, then that excess capital, it might not be managed effectively for tax or investment purposes over the long term.
Right.
When we're talking about investment purposes, we see this all the time. You have everything in this one big brokerage account. Maybe it's in a balanced allocation, a 50-50 mix. You're taking withdrawals from it each and every year. Well, that might mean that you're not taking enough risk with the assets that you're never actually going to use.
Sure.
You might say, I'm 80 years old. I shouldn't be investing too aggressively. However, you should probably have a portion of those assets set aside to say, hey, this is never money. This is a kid's money. They're only 20 years old. I could have this be 100% equities and give them a much better chance of a real growth rate.
So organizing your assets, understanding what's core and what's excess, and then strategizing how those assets are invested are very important. But Casey, you touched on something about tax law changes, right? When couples are here today and they're both healthy and happy, we've got a lot more wiggle room with the tax code than we do when somebody's a widow. And so those are some of the challenges we see. Take action today because we know what the tax rates are today. We don't know what they're going to be tomorrow, but we know that at some point, Uncle Sam's going to come for those tax dollars.
Yeah, well, and he's coming after it pretty fast right now. The author talks about who we should be leaving assets to. You should have your taxable assets traditionally left to your children so they get a step up in basis. Your IRAs, your tax-deferred assets, those should be left behind to your charities typically because those will bypass any federal, state, local taxes, estate taxes as they pass on to that charity. And then you've got Roth IRA assets, another great asset to leave behind to your children. However, Marshall, as you said, there's something on the table right now called the STEP Act, Sensible Taxation and Equity Promotion. Okay. And so we've got a nice fancy name for a new tax law that's potentially going to get passed and could be retroactive to December 31st of 2020. And this would reduce the ability to get that step up in basis for those after-tax assets that you plan to leave to your heirs. It could also force capital gains recognition upon gift or even upon death. This is why you need to stay on top of those beneficiary designations, your trusts, your wills, and the way that you're spending money. Should you be drawing money out of your non-qualified assets, your after-tax assets, your taxable assets, your tax-free assets, your tax-deferred assets? Well, there's a good chance that you should probably have somewhat of a blended strategy, especially as things become more complex and the risk of rising taxes comes down the road. So right now, give us a call and we will walk you through a comprehensive tax analysis in addition to a complimentary financial review for the next 10 callers. And what you'll do is you'll meet with a financial advisor on our team, either in person or we could do it through a video meeting, and we will help you to determine how prepared you are to handle these different retirement pitfalls, not just stress testing your plan against rising taxes, but stress testing against things like inflation, healthcare emergencies, even stock market crashes. In short, we'll take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. So again, it can just take 30 minutes. For the next 10 callers that call right now at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, we're offering a comprehensive financial review with no obligation. Stick around because next up, we have questions from you.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me. And this is our opportunity to turn the mic back to you and see what's on your mind. Every single week, we receive questions from individuals just like you, watching our TV show, listening to our radio show, listening to the podcast from across the country, and they have questions just like you. So if you have something that's keeping you up at night, maybe it's RMDs. Maybe it's the latest tax law. Maybe it's the risk of inflation. Maybe it's Bitcoin. Well, just head on over to retirewithpurpose.com. Drop your question in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. There's a little text box there, and we will answer it here on the show. And also, you can always call us. You can call us at 866-482-9559 or shoot us a text at 866-482-9559. Oh, yeah, and there's that little thing called email, info@howardbailey.com. Our first question comes from Carol, and Carol says, how many years out from retirement should I realistically start securing my income? And prior to that, what baby steps should I take besides contributing to my 401k?
Baby steps. I like that. Well, Carol, you've got a great question here. You know, there's no hard, fast rule of thumb here, but a lot of people, when they get to that 10-year mark, they start to think about it, right? Maybe they put a plan in place, maybe they don't, but sometime between 10 years out and 5 years out from retirement, now we're starting to get critical. That 5-year out window is when I like to see people start to move some pieces into place, and you're really just trying to understand your income need, and you're trying to look at, okay, when I do retire, how much income am I going to have coming in the door minus my expenses? And do I have a gap? So sometimes, Casey, we start to build that first leg of income maybe 5 years out from retirement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like we might have a Dave Ramsey fan on our roster here.
Yeah?
Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Right?
Oh, yeah,
baby
that's
steps.
Right. Yeah. Uncle Dave loves those baby steps.
Old Dave didn't really create baby steps for retirement, though. Baby steps for getting to retirement, but now we're trying to get through retirement, and a big part of that is securing your income, Carol. And as you mentioned, securing your income, how early do we start this? There was actually a really interesting article that we shared in our weekend reading email series not long ago that was some of the latest research on creating an income strategy or creating a guaranteed income strategy prior to retirement. It's dollar cost averaging into guaranteed income. They shared the risks of waiting until your retirement date to just plop down and set aside a chunk of funds in order to secure that income for the rest of your life. There are obvious risks in that, everything from interest rate risk to market risk. Instead, they saw better consistent results if you dollar cost averaged into that. So when you're working, you're taking a chunk out of every paycheck and you're putting it into your 401k, for instance. When the market's lower, you're buying more shares. When it's higher, you're buying less shares. You're effectively timing the market without having to know anything about it. Well, the same thing can happen on the back end of retirement. Now you're dollar cost averaging into guaranteed income solutions. So that might be one thing that you think about. And I do think, as Marshall said, 5 years, 10 years at the most in order to start securing that retirement income strategy. But I think the most important thing that Marshall said is the baby steps, which is what? Look at it, right? You just need to look at it. And if you just want to look at it, you're really just putting together analysis, right? This is your opportunity to start looking at different analysis of what your retirement might look like. That would be a tax analysis. That would be a Social Security analysis. That would be a risk analysis. You know, those are really the three standard things that you need to do to get a good handle on where you're at today to start slowly making some decisions on what you need to do to get to where you need to be in the future. And these are things that we do every single day in our office. You can give us a call right now at 866-482-9559. We'll walk you through those baby steps. We will deliver to you a tax analysis, a Social Security analysis, and a risk analysis along with projections. 866-482-9559.
That was a very good question, Carol. I think as people near retirement, we start to fine-tune things. You might just be socking it away in the 401k. Now we need to fine-tune things, and that means saving outside of the 401k to give you more flexibility at the start of retirement. So great question. Give us a call if you want to dig in a little bit deeper. Next up, we've got Kevin. Kev says, what are some strategies for utilizing a health savings account for healthcare costs in retirement?
Oh, just use the heck out of it, right? I mean, just use the heck out of it. And I do I say that, because it can be used for just so many different things,
Sure.
and basically anything medical. I think some don't feel like they're able to use it for their premiums, but you can. I mean, this is why the recommendation is that you save all of those dollars in that HSA and don't actually use the HSA on your way to retirement.
Mm-hmm.
You accumulate that because you'll need it when you're in retirement. It's growing tax-free, and you're getting a tax deduction as long as you're using it for qualified health expenses, office visits, Medicare premiums, hearing aids, health insurance deductibles, dental expenses. I mean, it really runs a gamut all the way to long-term care insurance premiums. So you will use that HSA at some point down the road. You might want to watch out for some of those bigger years when you're able to potentially actually take some deductions.
Sure.
If you had some really big medical expenses and you had other assets that you could use to pay those expenses outside of your HSA and qualify for a deduction, that might be the one strategy that I would consider. Marshall's also, you did this for yourself. You can do an IRA conversion strategy too.
Yeah, so once in a lifetime, you can convert from your IRA to an HSA. You may want to wait until you're over a certain age to get the higher limits, but it's kind of neat. You can take money out of an IRA one time in your lifetime and convert it to your HSA. That's something that's pretty neat that everybody can take advantage of. And, Casey, HSAs are just one of my favorite accounts to fund each and every year. It's like a super IRA. Some people call it the super Roth. You get the tax deduction up front, tax-free growth, and it's tax-free distributions as long as it's for health-related expenses. And I will say that's any medical expense from the time that account was opened. So even if you save a pool of money in your HSA and then you retire early, let's say you retire at 57 and you can't access your IRAs. Well, you can access your HSAs as long as you've got the receipts to prove those expenses occurred after you started the HSA.
And Kevin, I'm going to refer you back to our least downloaded Retire with Purpose podcast of all time.
Please, everybody go out and download that one for us.
Episode 42, making the most of a health savings account once you retire. I just think this is such a great episode. I cannot believe that is by far our least downloaded episode of all time, and yet people still have a question about this. So Kevin, go to retirewithpurpose.com. Check out episode number 42 to learn more about HSAs.
Yeah, the Dark Horse podcast out there. Suzanne, next up we've got Suzanne Casey. She says, what if I start Social Security benefits early? Will they eventually increase later?
We hope so, Suzanne.
Not likely.
The only reason that they would increase would be due to cost of living adjustments. So your COLA, your cost of living adjustment, that it should occur annually.
Sure.
And so that is tied to something known as CPIW. So it's Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's really just the standard inflation rate, right? So if we see, I know over the last 10 years, I've heard a lot of retirees complaining that they didn't get the right inflation adjustment. It was 0.7%. It was 1.3%. It was 1.5%. Yeah, but if you took the numbers from the 70s, you would have seen some years where you received double-digit increases in your Social Security payments. So if we see inflation jump dramatically in the future, you should see some pretty dramatic jumps in your Social Security benefits, just like we saw back during the 70s. So those are things that you really have the chance to receive in the future. And Social Security, there's a good reason to delay it, especially if you think inflation is going to be higher in the future, because that means that Social Security payment could be 25% or more greater than it is today.
Sure.
And if you're getting a 10% increase on $1,000 instead of $750, that's a pretty good chunk of change. You're getting a $100 bump instead of a $75 bump. So the longer you delay, it just becomes such a more beneficial or a better strategy for inflation protection in retirement.
Yeah, we look at the 47-year history of the cost of living adjustment for Social Security. The 47-year average is 3.53%. I think that would surprise some people because here recently, the 10-year average has hovered around 1.65%. So it's been historically lower here the last 10 years. But you bring up a good point, Casey, and I think the Social Security conversation is such a dynamic conversation because if you delay Social Security, well, that means you're going to have to generate income from somewhere else. Are you going to continue to work? Do you have other resources that you can draw upon and delay Social Security? But it also goes back to something that you've talked about quite a bit. It's like, what is your greatest fear? Is your greatest fear running out of money and living too long, longevity risk? If that is one of your fears, somebody may really want to delay Social Security if that's their greatest fear.
Well, yeah, and the average retiree should delay taking Social Security as long as they possibly can because the average retiree doesn't have enough saved for retirement. However, if you are in a position where you have a well-capitalized retirement, you've done a great job saving, you have more than you need in retirement, what we find time and time again is those individuals will actually end up with more money in the end if they take Social Security early rather than delaying it. If you're contemplating this decision, we want you to take advantage of our special offer today to get a complimentary Social Security analysis. All you have to do is shoot us an email at info@howardbailey.com. That's info@howardbailey.com or at 866-482-9559. 866-482-9559. Give us a call, shoot us an email, and we will run a free Social Security analysis for you. We'll send it back to you, and you'll know when the most optimal time is for you to take your Social Security. Then what we would want to do as a next step, if you think that's of value, is we would then want to integrate that with your comprehensive financial plan, taking into consideration your total wealth and your own unique goals and needs. So again, give us a call at 866-482-9559 for a complimentary financial review. We'll be right back after the short break with David McKnight discussing the power of the 0% tax bracket and his latest book, Tax-Free Income for Life. We're going to give it away for free, so stick around.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, and another very special repeat guest. We have David McKnight on the show today. We're going to be sharing clips of our conversation that actually appeared on the Retire with Purpose podcast and our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. You can check it out at retirewithpurpose.com. This will be released as episode number 225 of the Retire with Purpose podcast. He is nationally recognized tax expert and author of the best-selling book, The Power of Zero, the 0% tax bracket in retirement. He returned to the show to discuss his latest book, Guaranteed Tax-Free Income, titled Tax-Free Income for Life, which we're going to be giving away for free here later in the show. So stay tuned and find out how to get a free copy of Tax-Free Income for Life for yourself. But first, I want to share a clip from our discussion where David shares with us why he believes the tax train is a-coming now, faster than it was even when he released his last book, and what mounting national debt specifically has to do with it.
Here's the primary problem. The whole reason why we can afford to have so much debt is because interest rates are historically low. What's going to happen, though, as the debt gets bigger and bigger and bigger, other countries are not going to really believe that we're going to have the ability to pay that money back. And so they're going to say, yeah, we'll continue to loan you money, but with a proviso that, we get to charge you more interest. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to get to the point where we have so much debt, interest rates are going to return to historically normal levels, that the cost of servicing all of that national debt is going to consume the entire federal budget. Forget about Social Security, forget about Medicare, Medicaid, forget about the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. All of these things are going to be above and beyond what we can currently pay for under today's current tax rates. And so a lot of experts have come out and said, look, even in the next 10 years, tax rates will have to increase dramatically or we go broke as a country. In fact, some of them have even said that tax rates will have to double within the next 10 years to keep our country, sort of keep our ship of state afloat.
I think we're all aware of the risks, right? I think David just does a good job of sharing with us specifically what those risks are and why we really should be acting today to prepare for rising taxes in the future. I think for years we've been beating this drum of the risk of higher taxes, and now I think today you can see it. It's on the docket. You know, it's around the corner where we're going to see significantly higher taxes in the future, especially for the wealthy, but not just the wealthy. This is something that typically has a trickle-down effect, and over time, it will be necessary that it negatively impacts everyone's bottom line due to the national debt. Now, David McKnight's latest book is titled Tax-Free Income for Life. And this book was put out there and shared with you because there's two main aspects that you need to make sure you have covered in retirement. You need to have income for life. You also need to make sure if taxes go up, that income you have for life will be tax-free for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about rising taxes. You don't have to worry about stock market crashes. You don't have to worry about longevity risk. And in a Harvard study, David shared with us that it didn't show that individuals that have $1 million or $2 million or $4 million have no fear of running out of money in their lifetime. It took $15 million, and yet he says you don't have to have $15 million to know you'll never run out of money and eliminate that as a fear. You just need to make sure you have tax-free income for life.
Yeah, it's not about your assets and retirement, it's about your income. And so I think what that Harvard study really shows is that even people of substantial means, when they're sort of dependent upon the ebbs and flows of the stock market over time to ensure that they're going to have enough income coming in year over year, that can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster ride versus the people that have guaranteed streams of income that are guaranteed to last as long as they do. Those are the people that tend to have the much softer pillow at night. They tend to have happier retirements. In fact, Stephen Drubner from Freakonomics has studied this for a while. He even said people live longer lives. So not only are they happier, but they have longer lives when they have guaranteed sources of income that last as long as they do, as opposed to relying on positive returns from the stock market to meet all of their income needs in retirement.
I found this really interesting, and I just want to emphasize this. I have, and I shared this with David, I have families that I work with that have much smaller dollar amounts, $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, right? That are 100% confident they'll never run out of money in retirement. They have no problem spending their life savings. And then I have individuals that have $5, $10, $15 million saved that I can't get to spend, and they're concerned they're going to run out of money. And the difference between these two individuals I find is that those that have the $10, $15 million, they don't feel like they need any guarantees. So they don't get any guarantees. They say, I don't need any guarantees. I've got plenty of money. I'll just live off the interest, and yet they're still concerned. But those individuals that have $500,000, $1 million, they're ready to get some guarantees. And because they have those guarantees, they can have greater confidence in spending in retirement than those that might have 5, 10 times as much wealth as they do.
Exactly. And it's about that peace of mind, knowing, like he said, that you can sleep well at night, knowing that paycheck's coming in month after month.
Well, and maybe you're one of those lucky individuals that sought out a qualified financial planner, received some guaranteed income for the rest of your life. But if you have your guaranteed income in a tax-deferred bucket, you set aside funds from your traditional IRA, your 401k, your 403b, if you set aside those tax-deferred dollars to create a guaranteed income stream for the rest of your life, David's here to tell you that income's not really guaranteed.
And one of the things that I like to tell people, and I this is sort of the culminating point in the book, is that your income in retirement can be guaranteed, but if you do it within the tax deferred bucket, the after tax amount is not guaranteed, and that's the rub. Because you're sort of beholden to the IRS. As tax rates go up, the amount of after-tax income that you get to keep goes down. And where do you think most Americans go to plug that hole in their guaranteed lifetime income? They go to their stock market portfolio and they spend down what's remaining in their stock market portfolio. What happens if by taking money out of that tax deferred bucket, that guaranteed, that SPIA income, that increases your provisional income to the point where you now have a $5,000 tax on your Social Security. How are people going to pay that tax on their Social Security? Well, they're going to take more money out of their stock market portfolio to plug the hole in their Social Security. So there's two holes that can be created in your guaranteed lifetime income by having, by situating your annuity within the tax deferred bucket. And the combination of those two holes and the act of compensating for them can, force you to spend down your stock market portfolio 10 to 12 years faster than you ever thought possible. And I think that a lot of advisors out there don't recognize the unintended consequences of positioning those SPIAs within the tax deferred bucket. And so part of the point of my book was just to educate not only advisors, but members of the general public that you should be very, very thoughtful before you decide to drop a huge amount of money into a SPIA or into an FIA for that matter, that doesn't have the ability to allow you to do that piecemeal internal Roth conversion.
So what David's sharing with us is this strategy. So his strategy that he outlines in the book, Tax-Free Income for Life, is to first set aside dollars in a guaranteed income vehicle, a fixed indexed annuity, a SPIA, or some type of vehicle that'll give you guaranteed income for life, and then systematically do Roth conversions. So by the time you turn on that lifetime income benefit, you don't have to worry about rising taxes because now you have guaranteed tax-free income for life. You have stock market assets, inflation-based assets that are set aside to safeguard you against inflation, to use to supplement those income needs if you need it down the road. And then you have assets that are left over that you might use for flexibility. That flexibility may be needed if you have something like a long-term care need. He calls this last piece of the puzzle a LIRP, or a life insurance retirement plan. And I'll let him share with you the benefits and how this vehicle works right now.
So it's the perfect vehicle to fund discretionary needs when you need to plug the hole in your roof, or you want to take the kids or the grandkids to Disney World, but you don't want to draw upon your stock market portfolio because it's down. Take the money out of your LIRP. The money's growing safely and productively. The other part, as I said earlier, I talked about the risk of long-term care. What most LIRP companies allow you to do these days is to receive your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. So for example, you have a death benefit of $400,000. You wake up one day, you can no longer feed yourself, bathe yourself, transfer yourself, what have you. Find one doctor to write one letter to that effect. They will start sending you 2% of that death benefit, or $8,000 a month, every month for 4 years for the purpose of paying for long-term care. And guess what? If you die peacefully in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, guess what? Someone's still getting a death benefit, probably your kids. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something that you hope you never have to use. And so in my mind, the LIRP is very, very useful in the sense that you can draw tax-free income out to pay for those discretionary needs when your stock market portfolio is down, and the death benefit doubles as long-term care. And should you die peaceful in your sleep, never having needed long-term care, then your kids get a death benefit. I've noticed that 80% of my clients who enter into LIRPs do so because of that long-term care benefit.
You know, if you'd like to learn more about how to create a tax-free income for life, you want to know more about creating a strategy that gives you the confidence to spend for the rest of your life without concerns about rising taxes and inflation and longevity, we have a special offer for you today. We partnered up with David McKnight to offer copies of his latest book, Tax-Free Income for Life, free to you right here, right now. In this book, David explains how a combination of guaranteed inflation-adjusted income, and a proactive strategy can shield you from longevity risk and higher taxes in the future. We have a stack of books here that David sent over to our office. We're going to be giving them away until they're all gone. So to claim your free copy of Tax-Free Income for Life, call or text the word TAX, that's TAX, to 866-482-9559. Again, 866-482-9559. Call or just text the word TAX to 866-482-9559. Stick around, because after this short break, we're going to be quantifying the risk-return trade-offs of investing.
First-time callers are eligible to receive one in-stock book per request. Limit 1 book per week per household, up to 3 books per calendar year. See full terms at howardbailey.com/terms. You're listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weade. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me.
Hey.
To discuss another weekend reading article with you. What is weekend reading? Well, you'd know if you signed up at retirewithpurpose.com. First name and email. We get you signed up to receive one email from us every single Friday with 4 articles on trending topics in the financial planning space, all designed to help you make better decisions on your way to, and most importantly, through retirement. We like to pick one of those articles out with you and cover it right here on the show and in full-length discussion on the podcast. If you think this conversation means something to your bottom line, I encourage you to check out retirewithpurpose.com. Check out the podcast. We'll have a full-length discussion and a link to the article right there. This article comes to us from The Street, and like the street, not like the street, like the periodical, the
like
street,
taking it to
news.
the street,
the market news source, The Street.
Okay,
you were close. And this one is titled "Quantifying the Risk-Return Trade-Offs of Investing."
Quantifying the risk-return trade-offs. Well, this sounds like a pretty scientific article, Casey.
Well, you know how I like these nerdy articles every once in a while?
Yes, you do.
And I love a good nerdy guest on the podcast. If you check out the podcast, you're going to see we're bringing on national experts, right? We're bringing on PhDs, retirement researchers. We're not bringing on people that are there to sell you something. We want somebody that is a little nerdy. And then we like to talk about nerdy subjects every once in a while as well. And I think quantifying the risk-return trade-offs of investing, that's a pretty nerdy topic.
Sure.
But it's a very important topic, and one that I find that most individuals don't understand fully.
Sure.
And you can easily get in over your head if you don't fully understand. I think the thing is, it's like when you go out and buy something, you know what you're getting, right? You know the trade-off
like
that you're getting.
Right.
You go out, you buy yourself a new MacBook Pro. You go, well, it's I don't even know how much they cost now. Let's say it's $1,500. So you go out, you buy a MacBook Pro, you know, hey, downside, I'm going to have to give up $1,500. But I think it's worth that or more to me because I'm getting this piece of equipment that I know, I understand, I feel good about. It's the best computer out there right now. And I know what the downside is. It's very simple. The downside is I've got to pay $1,500, but this is what I'm getting in return. I think, it's more difficult when it comes to the stock market to evaluate the price and evaluate the trade-offs. I always go back to what Warren Buffett always says, right? Price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see the price and the value when you're buying a car, when you're buying a computer, when you're getting yourself a new mailing hat, right? If you go out and get a product, you know what the pros and cons are.
If they're in stock.
Yeah. But then on the other side of this, when you're buying stocks, it's not the same way. The cost of our decisions, they just aren't as apparent.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people go, well, put your money in the stock market. It's going to average 10, 12%, whatever it is. You got to deal with the ups and downs. And I think from behavioral science standpoint, that's why I'm so excited about behavioral finance studies, and because that's not how our brains work. We hear, yes, we're going to average 10%, but we don't really process the risk-return trade-off.
there must be a cost. I mean, if the S&P 500 has averaged a 10% annual return since 1970, what's the cost? There has to be a cost. And I think you always hear, you say, hey, what's the cost? And what's a typical advisor going to say? Well, hey, you got to go through the ups and downs. And you go, okay, like I've been on a roller coaster before. It was fun, so I think I can handle the ups and downs. It's like it's not quantified very well. It doesn't really give you the full depth and breadth of understanding that you need to really understand the trade-offs. So what does that mean? Because if we don't fully grasp that, if you haven't fully grasped the risk of stocks, then that can be a key reason why your retirement plan, why your financial plan, why your investment plan actually completely falls apart.
Right. So let's take an example here. So they've got the S&P 500 quarterly data going back to 1970. If you invested $1 in 1970, your dollar grew to $182.50.
Dude, and if you just looked at this chart, chart and go, hey, put in $1, turns into $182, I think that could mislead you. That might lead you to, well, you know what? I guess I just need to sit back and wait, and
sure.
And so that can lead you to overstate your tolerance or your capacity for risk at that time. Or you might look at this and go, there's some bumps in the road. I wonder if I just didn't buy it and hold it. If I did some stuff, I got in there and pressed some buttons. If maybe I can get all the up without any of the downside. Or maybe it just leads you to close your eyes and not look at it and not really pay attention to your allocation, your balance.
Yeah, or the opposite, where somebody looks at this chart and goes, well, geez, the market dropped 50%. I don't even want any part of the stock market. So then they're not taking any risk. That could be a problem too.
And that can be very damaging in a low interest rate environment, especially if you're only working with a broker that's only selling you stocks or bonds, only selling you fixed income or equities. You go, well, I guess I have to keep it in the market. So what do? Well, I go to basically no return, or I take on more risk than I'm comfortable with. There's more solutions than that. But again, it starts with understanding your risks. And a good part of those risks are just the short-term losses. I mean, I've heard individuals say the market doesn't have risk. They say the stock market isn't risky because it always goes up. Yeah, over long periods of time. However, you have to understand there's going to be some short-term losses in there. Short-term losses are just part of the game. And when I say there's some short-term losses in there, I'm saying in over half of the quarters since 1970, 51% of the quarters since 1970, the S&P traded below its previous high.
Wow.
Right? Below its previous high. So that's some bad quarters. The percentage by which the index is below its previous high is over 10% on average, but it could be higher, over 40%, and for longer periods of time. One of the costs of investing in stocks is that you're going to be disappointed the majority of the time. And this is why if you're someone that logs into your account every day, the majority of the time you log into your account, check your balances, look at your equities, look at your investments, your brokerage account, the majority of time, if we're looking over a 10, 20 years period of time, it's going to be negative. If you can't handle that, then you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, so the article talks a little bit about loss aversion. So in behavioral finance, we know this as the previous high is relevant here because of our tendency to anchor our expectations to it and because of our sensitivity to losses. This behavior is known as loss aversion. Well, this is important because if you look at this data here that they're showing, returns can vary extremely over year. While the average is 10%, annual returns are much different than that. Over a 12-month period, S&P returns can be as high as 61% and as low as 43% using monthly data.
Yeah, 61% positive, 43% negative. It's like, well, the 61 felt great.
Woo.
However, if your $1 million went to $570,000 over a 12-month period, could you go without losing any sleep? The answer is probably no. I mean, if you lose half your net worth over time, over a 12-month period, you're probably going to have some anxiety. And if that's going to lead you to panic, then you shouldn't be there. If that's going to give you anxiety, then you really shouldn't be there either. Especially if you already have enough money, if you've already won the game, why put any more stress in your life? And why, as you get older, did you start staying at nicer hotels? Why, as you got older and became more successful, did you go from, say, business class to first class? Why did you start doing some of those things? Why did you start using the valet instead of just parking your own car? And you started doing those things because it was more convenient. It was less stressful. You enjoyed it. Well, if continuing to take excess risk with your portfolio is going to add risk to your life and add stress to your life, and as an end result, then maybe you should think about paying a little bit more. And that price might be a lower return, just like the price of getting that valet parking is tipping the bellboy.
No, I think that's the greatest point here. We see diversifying risk, and this gentleman is a fee-only planner, so his tools are in the market, right? He's going to talk about diversification. But, in our process, Casey, we talk about segmenting risk. What's the purpose? Depending on when assets, we talked about this in the first segment, what they're used for. Is this for income or is this for legacy? Your core assets, understanding the big picture can help you deal with the risk-return trade-off.
Well, and I think he does a good job outlining what your preferences are, or, for us in our firm, we call this your attitude. Your capacity for risk, your attitude for risk, your need for risk. All this adds up to, can you take the risk? Capacity, attitude, and need. The author outlines this as preferences first. So if you're affected by short-term movements in the stock market, if you check your account balance often, if you tend to brood over past decisions, if you're likely to change your investments after substantial losses or overreact to short-term losses, if these are things that describe you, or maybe a loved one for that matter, then you're probably in the wrong place. You're probably misallocated if you're continuing to overallocate to the stock market. You need to make sure that your goals, your priorities are well in line with your attitude, with your preferences for taking risk in the market. And if you feel like they're out of whack right now, I know a lot of individuals do. Over the last year, we have found that over the last 12 months, individuals' comfort with the stock market, comfort with taking risk. We had someone, it's went down substantially. We just had someone the other day that last year on a scale of 1 to 100, they were an 83. This year, they come in and they're a 34, Woo. Right? Their comfort level with taking risk after what they saw over the last 12 months has been cut in more than half. And that might be you. But if that's you and you haven't made any adjustments to your plan, then you might be in a pickle when the next storm comes along. So give us a call right now for a complimentary risk analysis. We'll take a look at your existing allocations. We'll take a look at your existing risk level and ensure that it's in line with where you want it to be. So for the next 10 callers, give us a call right now for a complimentary financial review. You'll meet with an independent financial advisor on our team, either in person or through a video meeting from the comfort of your home. We'll help you determine how prepared not just you psychologically are to handle retirement pitfalls like stock market crashes, but also rising taxes, inflation, healthcare emergencies. Can your portfolio and you handle it? In short, we'll take the guesswork out of financial planning for you. It can take just 30 minutes. So for the next 10 callers, call 866-482-9559. 866-482-9559. We're offering a comprehensive financial review at no obligation. We'll catch you right back here next week on Retire with Purpose.
You've been listening to Retire with Purpose, hosted by Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson. Investment advisory services offered through Howard Bailey Securities, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Working with Howard Bailey Securities, LLC cannot guarantee investment success or that specific financial goals will be achieved. Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc. owns the certification mark CFP and Certified Financial Planner in the U.S., which it awards to individuals who successfully complete CFP Board's initial and ongoing certification requirements. Howard Bailey Financial is a registered trademark of Howard Bailey Financial. All rights reserved. Information is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice. Howard Bailey Financial nor its advisors are qualified to give tax or legal advice. You are encouraged to consult with your tax or legal professional for guidance on your individual situation. This radio show is a paid placement.